We're discussing the Silicon Valley real estate marketplace for the week ending April the 4th, Saturday. The reason I say April the 5th up here is because that's the weekly cutoff. I have a fiscal real estate year that starts on March the 1st. April the 5th is the normal comparison. First, these are the key chapters, the graphics to go with it. The first 5 slides are a recap. Here's what we're starting off with. We're looking at the turnover time. Turnover time has been coming down. A good reason for the turnover rate to come down now is this is Easter weekend, and so there's less new listings. The buyers haven't disappeared yet because they were around for last weekend, but there's less inventory bringing down the turnover time. But we're still about 23% longer turnover time than you would expect for this week compared to the past 10 years median. Same thing on the number of offers accepted. We're down here at 85% of the level of offers you'd expect. But keep in mind, that's still higher than we've been basically at any time for the last 4 years. So even though it's missing 15% of the marketplace, it's better than any time basically since the 2022 price corrections that we've had. Yes, it did get up to 92% up here, which was the all-time high. Now you're just sort of right at the record high. So I'm still not seeing any huge indications that the Iran hostilities or war has negatively impacted real estate. Yes, it's come down. Yes, interest rates have gone up. They've gone up 1/8% for the last 4 weeks. So now they're up 0.5% higher than they were before. And I think the exact numbers are 6%, 6.11%, 6.22%, 6.36%. And now I think we're at 6.46. So if you were at 6.5, that would be an 8% every week, but you're so close. It's a good round way of remembering it. We've gone up 1/8 of 1% on the interest rate based on the Freddie Mac high balance conforming loan limits for the nation. Obviously, jumbo loans are currently about 0.25% lower locally, and then you also can get relationship pricing. So you can get interest rates right now right around 5.75%. So there's still good interest rates long term. They're not where they were down at the pandemic, but that was to stimulate the economy. Moving on, looking at the active inventory, you can see active inventory came down dramatically this week. You can see it was up here at almost 40% more inventory, and now you're about 25% or about 26% more inventory than expect. So buyers have a little bit more choice out there. And you can see that that's what I was talking about. It's a drop in the inventory that caused the drop in the turnover rate that you can see behind there. And the next slide, and this is the second to last slide of the summary presentation, so hang in there if you just want to get a quick overview. Here what we're looking at is the turnover time. You can see, yes, earlier this year it was basically right at typical. Right at the beginning of the year it was at typical. Then it slowed down and it stayed slow. It got a little bit slower, but now it's starting to improve. And partly that's because the market normally slows down a little bit. And that's the cool end. And part of the reason the market's slowing down this time is we were being influenced by the pandemic for 1 year. So you eliminate 1 year on the slow side, and that raises the number. So that's why I think we have this little bulge at this time of the year when normally the market's hot. So compare it more to the typical line, the gray line, and you're basically behaving normally. And you can see it's 23% more. Right now, it takes 37 days to sell the inventory out one time. That's still fairly fast. Marketing time is a related number, but this only counts the successful sellers. How long is it taking 3 out of 4 of the successful sellers to sell their property? And you can see right now it's at 16 days. Typical is 15, so it's 1 day longer. The longest is 18, so very quick turnovers. That means that only 1 out of 4 sellers takes longer than 2 weeks and 2 days to sell their property. It's 10% longer than normal. If you remember last week, I was questioning my numbers. I did go back and I did find an error. And you can see that we're now at 15 here for the typical instead of 16. I think the real number is 14.8, but I'm not showing the decimal points on the marketing time. And the biggest reason for that is I was doing my fiscal real estate year on March the 1st. So there was a discontinuity on March the 1st, and that impacted the data. I rolled back the discontinuity to January the 3rd, which is one of my weeks based on my March 1st. So there's 2 discontinuities. The rollover on the first 10 years is back to January the 3rd. The rollover for the calendar year is on March the 1st. very confusing, but I think that's a better representation, and I'm liking the numbers I'm getting. So that's what I'm sticking with until I find more data I don't like. Price reductions. Again, it's the purple line is the raw data. You're going back 13 weeks. You can see you're taking larger price reductions than normal. You're taking 2.5 times larger price reductions. And you might think, wow, that's a huge number. It's 0.6%. Part of the reason this percentage of the increase is so large is normally you only expect 0.25% of a price reduction. It is less than when you're in a soft marketplace. So you're still within the realm of a normal marketplace, a little bit softer, a little bit larger price reductions, or more frequent price reductions. We don't know from the summary chart which of those two it is. Overbidding from the buyers, more than typical. Look at this. The buyers, you'd expect the data to show. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks to close. Right now is when you'd expect the data for overbidding from the breakout of hostilities on Iran to start showing up in the overbidding category. And that is not happening. We're having more overbidding, 8.7%, typical of 7.5. So 1.3% more overbidding than we typically have. You can see that in a hot marketplace, you're 12.5%. So even though 8%, almost 9% sounds like a high overbid, it is not a high overbid for Silicon Valley. Offers accepted. You can see that you're below the gray line, so you're less than typical, but you're above the blue line. And again, the blue line dips down, I think, in large part because we lost a slow year with the pandemic, because that was the slowest year, and it's an artificial. So instead of the true median, if you ignored that 1 year, which I don't like to ignore, then I think this graph would not dip down so much. You can see that a couple weeks down the road, when you were able to show properties, the bow down disappears, and that's why I'm making that hypothesis. We're at 85.1% of where we typically are, 2,200 transactions. There is still a fair amount of volume in the 3 counties. Inventory, you can see that inventory came down. One of the reasons inventory came down, again, is Easter. And remember, Easter is one of those holidays that moves around a little bit. So Easter is in 1 year this year, which is why the decrease this week is greater than the typical decrease of the slow marketplace. Anyway, we're 25% more inventory than normal, 2,343, 2,500 is the blue line, which would be the most you'd expect. So not as much inventory as you would expect in a slow marketplace, but still more inventory than normal. And then closed transactions, just on there more for FYI. It is what the industry runs on. It's currently at 86% of normal. So it's, again, missing about 14% of the marketplace. And the last summary slide is my micro market data, and apparently I didn't update this for the last 2 weeks, so I'll have to find out why that's not updating. The big takeaway on here is if you look on the left-hand side, it basically is saying that the market's hot. The one column that isn't hot is price reductions. So you can see price reductions are normal to slightly more than normal. Every other metric is still saying it's fast paced. But now if you come over and look at the green, you see an awful lot of blue and a lot of green. That's saying compared to normal, you're at the typical to slower than typical marketplace. So more favoring the buyer. Green and blue favors, well, green is neutral, blue favors the buyer, red favors the seller. And then finally, you get over here to appreciation and sold price, which has nothing to do with the activity, but it shows you the more expensive areas and the areas that have appreciated more. Basically, the sort of further out areas in Santa Clara County have had the highest appreciation, as well as the Newark area in Alameda County. And those are all over 100%. Overall, Silicon Valley is at 99% appreciation. I have pointed this out before. Santa Clara County's got 117% appreciation since the last 9 months of 2015. If you look at any one micro market area, they're all much lower than that 117%. How can I explain that discrepancy? It's real easy. It's the bottom portion, the expensive areas, Cupertino, Sunnyvale, Los Gatos, Saratoga, Los Altos, Palo Alto, that are making up a bigger market share right now than they typically do. That inflates the price for the county without inflating the price in those micro market areas. And that's how you get a county-wide number that is bigger than any one of its components. Here's some definitions for those going on their own. Here's the first heat map. Here's my colors code. I will point out there's one thing I still don't like, and I don't know how to address it. At 42 days, it's still showing up pink, but that's right at my borderlines. I think what I have to do is flip, instead of going from 1 week to 6 weeks and 6 weeks to 11 weeks, I'm going to have to do minus a day on one of those to get rid of this, because it's set 42. That's right where I flip from pink to green. And, it's the right color and it's the table lookup. So it can be a shade of green or a shade of pink. And I don't know which makes more sense, because right here, when you go down to 44 days, you can see it's a shade of green. Anyway, minor detail. These are the different colors that I have, so you can see their incremental steps, but I also have more colors in here, which I think is a better solution. The red is favoring the seller, blue is favoring the buyer, and the green and blue-green and yellow-green are all sort of neutral colors. Here's the turnover rate. You can see that, it's sort of a balance, sort of typical, but still look at some of these numbers, 172% of normal. So it's taking longer than normal to sell. So when you compare to normal, it is taking longer. You go over to the expensive areas and they're turning over. Saratoga, Los Gatos is quicker than normal, 90%. Los Altos at 104%, so dead on normal. And then Cupertino, Sunnyvale at 35%. So that's pretty typical. But you come to some of the more middle part of Silicon Valley, and it's taking 70% longer than normal to turn over the market one time. This is marketing time. This is how long is it taking to sellers to sell? Red across the board. So sellers are still selling quickly. What is quickly? That's under 3 weeks. 3 out of 4 sellers are selling in under 3 weeks. You can't complain about the market when that's happening in my book. Here's compared to normal. So even though it's still fast paced, you can see that that's normal. There's some blue greens, some yellow greens, some pinks, and maybe even some blues. No, some blues over in Union City, Fremont. Down here, you can see the color blue. I wish I could find a map that would give me a clear color background, so the colors that I'm putting on would show up higher contrast. Price reductions, sellers ask price reductions. You can see that there's sort of a whole realm over here, and this is just right now. Basically a balanced marketplace, sort of what you'd expect. But keep in mind, these are tight metrics. 1/4 to 1% price reduction is considered to be a normal marketplace. 1% or more is considered to be a buyer's marketplace. You have to have less than 1/4 of 1% price reduction to a price increase in order to get pink. What's happening in Mountain View, or actually Cupertino? They're increasing their price by 1/10 of 1%. That's not a huge number, but the fact that sellers are increasing their ask price before the offer comes in tells you a lot. Although I will share, I had done a very interesting episode. 2 different properties, both list prices way under what the market was worth. Had a buyer make an all cash offer on one and got a counter offer, and we just weren't willing to pay that price, and we thought it would, based on the price that we got, we thought it was a bluff price, and the property's on the market now at a higher price, but below the counter offer that they gave us. Life in the city. Here's magnitude of price reductions, and this is compared to normal. Here you can see that you're basically normal. You got some areas that are red, which are hotter than normal. The Atherton's hotter than normal. Definitely, all the color ranges here. So basically, it's a typical price reduction as far as the magnitude. Now let's look at the frequency. Really bright red everywhere, which means very few sellers are reducing their price. Less than 17% of the sellers, so that's 1 in 6 sellers, are reducing their price at all before the offer comes in. The only areas that are higher than that is Newark, and it's at 17.5%, so it's barely over that 17%. If you look at these numbers, most of them are single digits. 1.8% in Cupertino, 1.9% in Atherton. Price reductions are not very common. They're more common in Alameda County. You have 12% county-wide, and you have the Union City, Newark, that we already talked about, at 17.5%. Here's the frequency compared to typical. So you can see Union City and Fremont are taking significantly more price reductions than they normally do. And what are they talking about? They're talking 4.5 times more price reductions than they normally talk about. I mean, that's almost hard to conceive, but 17% is more than 4 times more. So that means the normal number of price reductions is around 4%. If you only have 1 out of 25 sellers reducing their price, which is not very many at all, you have an increase in that number and your percentages are real up here. And that's why people can say anything they want with statistics. My goal is to try to present a detailed analysis objectively of what the market's doing. Overbidding, 8.7% for Silicon Valley overall, 6.6% here in Santa Clara County. The most overbidding is in Alameda County at 11%. And that's pretty significant. San Mateo in between. But again, you can see most of the areas are red in colors. Large magnitude of overbidding. Here's versus typical. It's basically typical, maybe even cooler than normal in Santa Clara County. So less overbidding in Santa Clara County. Here's the frequency of overbidding. How common is it? Red, which means very common. How common? 72%. Basically across all three counties. The least amount of overbidding is on the San Mateo County coast, where only 1 in 4 sellers gets an overbid. And the highest number I'm seeing right off the bat is probably 86% in Cupertino, 91.4% in Berkeley and Alameda. Here's the frequency of overbidding compared to normal. This is absolutely normal. You got, and it may be a little less than normal. You got an awful lot of blue colors up here and an awful lot of green, and I'm not seeing any red. So slightly less overbidding than normal. Here's the offers. I don't have just the raw count on offers because each micro market area is a different size, so that doesn't make sense to post that. Just compared to normal, you got more inventory, less offers on the more affordable sides, normal number of offers on the west, more expensive side. So when you balance that out, that explains why, especially in Santa Clara County, the countywide appreciation rate is higher than the individual micro market areas. Here's the active inventory. Where do you have more inventory? Heart of Silicon Valley, Fremont's for balance, and then the West Peninsula area is sort of a checkerboard of less inventory and normal inventory. Here's the long-term appreciation. You can see where the areas have had the highest appreciation. The redder the color, the more appreciation. The bluer the color, the less the appreciation's been. And sold price, simply where they are. And one of the things I will point out is the median sold price in the area is the middle number. But I make it more useful, I believe, by sandwiching it, by giving you a price range. On the left-hand side is the least expensive that you'd expect to find a single-family home. And on the right-hand side is the most expensive. In Atherton, you can see you go from basically $2 3/4 million up to, for the lowest you'd expect to find a single-family home, to $5.5 million for the median, and up to almost 14, a little over 14 million for the most expensive. So you have quite a price range, and it's on the high, it's the highest of all of the areas. So again, here's the recap of the different areas. The left-hand side is the raw count. The middle sort of section is compared to the 10-year median. And then the right-hand side is price appreciation and pricing. It really doesn't have to do with conditions in the marketplace. At the very bottom, I have the range and the colors. You can see what every metric it should be in that range. Some definitions for the upcoming slides. Here, what we're doing now is we're looking at Silicon Valley, and the data is the purple, and we're comparing it to the long-term trends. The gray line is where you'd expect turnover time to be. The blue line is the longest turnover time, the slowest turnover time you'd expect, and that's where we are. We're down for Easter this week. What will we do going forward? We will probably climb because the median climbs, but will we climb as rapidly as the blue line, or will we do somewhere in between the blue line and the gray line? Time will tell. Turnover time on a percentage of normal. You can see the improvement this week, and you're somewhere around 23% longer turnover time than normal. Marketing time, this is that typical 3 out of 4 sellers. It came down because newer listings are what sold this week. But you're still selling in, what is that, 16 days? And that's all 3 counties. This is Silicon Valley as a whole. Here's the percentage of normal. You're 10% slower than normal. That's basically in the normal white range. Typically, most metrics by default, I give it 12% on each side of 100% for normal. Here's the graph that I really like for some reason. It's the 2.5% of the sellers that are taking the largest price reduction. What are they doing? The 97.5th percentile on price reductions. And they're taking a 10% price reduction. Slightly more than you'd expected, 8%, but less than the 11% that would be a slow marketplace. Definitely in the normal range, but leaning a little bit on a slow side. Here's a more typical presentation of the same information, and this is the average. So you can see your 0.6% price reductions. Normally you're only up here at 2.2%. And in a slow marketplace, you're down at almost 8/10%. Again, it's a bit larger price reductions than normal, but still in that normal range. Here's on a percentage basis. You can see it's really dropping off recently. One of the things that I would feel comfortable saying is sellers' expectations are greater out of line since the hostilities broke out with market realities, but the market reality is still fairly strong. Here's the frequency of the price reductions. You can see that they're a little bit more frequent, but they're still only 10%. That's only 1 in 10 sellers are doing a price adjustment. And the frequency compared to normal, it's a little bit more than normal, but still within the white band of what I would consider normal. You can see that we've been in that white band for most of the last 2 years. In 2022 and 2023, after the price correction, here's the beginning of the price correction. And this is one of the reasons why I said it really occurs in Valentine's Day of 2022. Look how rapidly price increases started to happen. I mean, that's 1 quarter right about here. And you went from 1/5 the normal price reductions were occurring to almost 3/4 more than normal happening. Not percentage of sellers, because you can't have 160%, but compared to typical. Here's the overbidding. What is overbidding? Overbidding is right at normal, and it normally dips down. So it'd be real interesting. And this is the median. So this is the midpoint. Half the buyers pay more than 5% over the seller's ask price. Half the buyers pay less than 5% over ask price. This is not what I was expecting it to be. I will punt on this and do some research on this. I thought this was back to my average overbid, and I thought it was my average overbid compared to normal, which I thought was 7.3 or 7.9 to 8.3. It was about 1.4% difference. I don't understand why this is up at 4%. Frequency of overbidding, 72% of the sellers are getting more than their asking price, right where you'd expect it to be, right on top of that gray line. If you look real carefully, you can see that it's slightly below, but I mean, that's so slightly below with the amount of statistical fluctuation and the fact that Easter's a little bit on the early side, I think, this year. I think it goes all the way out to April 22nd or something. Frequency, it's almost normal, 100% right up here, but a little bit less frequent overbidding. What is that, 98%? I mean, I would call that normal. Offers accepted. This is where you are lagging behind. You're down here at 2,200, and you should be up here somewhere around 2,600 homes selling. That's missing almost 400. That's about 20%, and I think the real number was 15% of the marketplace. Active inventory, it came down this week, and that's because of Easter. I would fully expect it to go up next week. Why would I expect it to go up next week? The red line's increasing, the gray line's increasing, the blue line's increasing. For us not to increase after we come out of the holiday would be very unusual. Here's my pricing model. We're basically very close to our peak pricing for the year, most likely, as well as for approaching the peak pricing that we achieved back in 2022. We're still not there. You can see that we rounded off a week ago was a little bit flatter. This week's even flatter. I'd expect this to start flattening out, sort of like it did back here in 2024 and even in 2025. So we're rolling over and we're sort of forming the peak of the mountain right now. And keep in mind, even though we're forming the peak of the mountain right now, that's transactions that already happened. But keep in mind, most people are not hearing what happened in March until April 22nd. We're still 2-3 weeks away from people finding out what happened back in March versus finding out what's happening right now. The fact that you're starting to see this price rollover, if you're a buyer right now, is when you can be in danger of overshooting. You're excited because the market's aggressive, but it's about ready to roll over. So you're paying the peak price. This is the time of the year where a buyer might want to pause and say, hey, I'm going to wait until I'm down here again. And you can see that every single year, even when you have price increasing, like at the 12% line, you still have the dip down. So even back here, 12% price increase. If you bought right here at the rollover point, you could have waited and bought it a little bit lower. But with a 12% increase, it's gambling. When you've been flat for the last 4 years, I think it gets to be a safer bet. Anyway, here's some more definitions of what's coming up next, comparing the 3 counties. San Mateo County is in the orange, Santa Clara County is in the blue, and Alameda County is in the gray. This is the turnover time. Alameda County is the slowest, San Mateo County is the fastest, all reasonable from 32 to 42 days. Time to sell, this counts only the successful sellers, so slightly different order. Santa Clara County is the fastest at 14 days, followed by San Mateo County at 15, and the longest is Alameda County at 20. Remember, that's less than 3 weeks for 3 out of 4 sellers to sell their property, regardless of their price and condition. But it only counts the successful sellers. It ignores the ones that come on the market at an unrealistic price and don't ever sell. Price reductions, very close together. Alameda County has the most price reductions at about 3/4%. Santa Clara County is next at about 0.6%, and San Mateo County has the least price reductions at about I'll call it 1/3% reduction. Here's the frequency. Alameda County has the most frequent price reductions at 12%. Santa Clara next at 10%. San Mateo County is only having 6% price reductions. I'm sorry, my book, we should not be crying in our milk about 6% of the sellers doing a price adjustment. Here's the overbidding. Alameda County, that had the slowest marketing time, slowest turnover time, has the highest overbid. The only explanation I can come up with is sellers are reducing their price and overshooting the market and then getting a overpriced offer on a reduced price after it's been on the market for a long time. And that's very typical because the market is very sensitive. I mean, you think about a 2% price reduction being not that significant, totally different world in the real estate marketplace. San Mateo County at 8% overbidding, and Santa Clara County has the least overbidding at 6.5%. Frequency of overbidding, all three are right together at 72% for all practical purposes. Offers accepted, Santa Clara County has the most offers accepted at just shy of 1,000, then Alameda County being the second, and then San Mateo being the smallest county. But notice that San Mateo County has basically got a record high for the last several years on volume. Not true in Alameda County, clearly below their peak, but almost true in Santa Clara County. We're selling more, and that's because we're at 85% of the normal level of offers accepted instead of 80% that we were. Active inventory, you can see all three counties rolled over because of Easter this weekend. Here's the appreciation. Santa Clara has the highest appreciation at almost 119%, and that's Santa Clara County by itself. And again, that's market mix. Santa Clara, if it didn't have the market shift, would probably be down here much closer to 80% like the other two counties. Here's the median sold price. You can see Santa Clara County just peeking out right here. This is on log paper, so San Mateo County is more expensive. And here it is on regular paper, a little easier to see because of the order of priority. Santa Clara County is at 2.1 million. San Mateo County is almost at 2.2. So you can see San Mateo is still below their 2.3 previous peak. You can see Santa Clara is below its previous peak of 2.150. But you can see that Santa Clara County, countywide, and again, this is market mix, so you're not going to see this in the micro market area, is above their 2022 peak. And again, that's because more expensive homes are selling. The people that are wealthy are not impacted and making a bigger part of the market share. PITI payments climbing, not only because of interest rates, but prices are going up still at this time of the year. Here's my table of metric. Again, I think we're going to end up about the 8th slowest year out of the last 10 and the 23rd slowest year out of the last 25. So we're still not selling a lot at 85%. Here's the data for Santa Clara, San Mateo, Alameda County, or on the far left for Silicon Valley. You can see the different metrics down the left-hand side. Here's some customization work I do for buyers. I've added a QR code for the handout. The handout is posted. This is the URL for those that want to type it. My goal is to get the handout out just prior to the presentation and that last 15 minutes before going live. I'm Richard Calhoun, real estate broker with Creekside Realty, working with buyers or sellers here in Silicon Valley. If you have any real estate needs, I'd appreciate a shout out and see if I can help you. Moving on to the distributions, definitions. Here's marketing time. This allows you to see the distribution. I cut it off at 50% because there's basically nothing happening down here. All the data converges. Focus up here on the right-hand side of the graph, longer marketing times. You can see the dotted line is what we're starting off at, and that's a year ago. Compare that to the purple line, where down here, the dotted line a year ago is slightly longer. So we have part of the marketplace here, the fast-paced marketplace is moving faster this year than it did a year ago, but the longer ones are longer this year than last year. Basically, as far as marketing time, we're very similar to 2025. You can see that we're starting to step up, so you'd expect longer marketing times going forward. You still see that steady climb up week after week. Now we're the plateau, just bounce around a little bit, climb a little bit, now down quite a bit, down, down, and now we're going to start slowing down. And down was actually an improvement. This is a slowing down of the marketplace as the line climbs. Now that's sort of the slowest for the year. Well, that was January the 3rd. Look how steep the line's getting over here on the right-hand side. That's an improving marketplace. And then as soon as it flattens out, you know the market's already slowing down. And you can see we were climbing already. So the market are already peaked as far as marketing time at the lowest level. Same concept with the largest price reductions. Keep in mind, we're ignoring the top 2.5% because that could be typos where someone put in an extra zero, and we're only going down to 17.5%. We're looking at the top 15% of the marketplace shifted down by 2.5%. We're starting off on the dotted line. The purple line is there. So we're doing less price reductions this year than last year on the top end of the marketplace. These are the largest. Up here is no price reduction whatsoever. This is small. They're still significant price reductions, but they're smaller than the dotted line. Let's start off a year ago. You can see the dotted line immediately started to increase. So you'd expect larger and larger ask price reductions. Look at it just climb down. That's more and more price reductions. Down here is the most, the blue line. Now you're getting in a clustered area. See how it's just leveling off and really not moving very much. So you have a plateau, but with larger price reductions. Now there's a little bit of an improvement right there at the beginning of October, and now it's slowing back down again. So a short-lived little speed up. And now you're at the end of the year bouncing around the bottom, and we're about ready to start taking off right there. January 14th, 17th, right there is probably the peak, marks the 1st, and it's already taking larger price reductions. So you can see how quickly the market changes from less price reductions to more. It happens on a dime, basically. Same concept with overbidding. Up here is the most overbidding, down here is the least overbidding. You have less overbidding this year than you did last year. But you're right at the peak, you're staying there for a couple more weeks, and then you're having less. I would expect the same trend for this year, a couple more weeks at this current level of overbidding before it starts cooling off. It's just been marching down, and now you're going to get to a plateau in the middle of July where you're really not moving very much. There's sort of the bottom at the end of August, and now it's actually improving. It's still improving, and right there, sort of the peak at the end of October. Oh no, another improvement. The November 8th was sort of the peak, and then it plateaued through December the 6th, and then it went down for the end of the year. The bottom is right there on January 31st. Notice the jump up. And now you're about ready to plateau at the top of the marketplace starting March 22nd. So, and these are closings, so there's a lag time between when the offers were accepted and the closings. Here's the Greater Bay Area, 5 regions, 13 counties, some definitions. Here you can see that the turnover time is improving for 4 out of the 5. Central Coast, but Central Coast is a small area and bounces around and really isn't reflective of the Silicon Valley area. Time to sell, improving in all areas, so less time, including here in Silicon Valley. Notice the turnaround from 2 weeks ago. Price reductions, little different mixed signals. Down in Silicon Valley, looks like it's down in the city of San Francisco and Marin, flat in the Central Valley, flat in North Bay. Central Coast is just noise. Frequency of price reductions basically looks like we're leveling off in Silicon Valley. no leveling off maybe in cities, leveling off in the Central Coast, leveling off in the Central Valley, leveling off in Napa. Overbidding, straight up in the cities, straight up in Silicon Valley, increasing in North Bay, increasing in the Central Valley, increasing in the Central Coast. Those are probably about ready to roll over. Frequency of overbidding, up in all regions, maybe flat in the North Bay, but otherwise up. Offers accepted, up in all regions except the Central Coast, which is basically flat. Active inventory is down in Silicon Valley, most sensitive to the holidays is my experience. Down in North Bay, flat in the Central Valley, up in Central Coast, down in the cities. Here's the appreciation. Silicon Valley has the highest appreciation, followed by the Central Valley, Central Coast, and then a two-way tied for last being the North Bay and the cities. Here's your price point. You can see that the cities is getting very close to its previous peak. Silicon Valley is very close when you include all three counties. Central Coast is not as close, but getting there. North Bay and Central Valley are lower price and not as price fluctuations. Here's the estimated payments, taking into consideration the increasing interest rates. And here's the table showing the data for the 5 regions and the 13 counties. Each of the 13 counties are down the left-hand side, along with the 5 regions in bold across. And the slightly different presentation, you have the now column is this week's reading, and then 1 week ago is the change from a week ago and the change from 5 weeks ago. You can look at your different metric and see what's happening in your county or region. I also put the Bay Area on here. I really think it's a garbage number. The only reason it's on there is the media uses it a lot. It's on there for reference because my data is going to be slightly different than the media talks about. But, you know, my value for single family homes, which does not include townhouses and condos, is $1.4 million for the Bay Area. I added the QR code on here. If you don't want to do typing, you should be able to take a photo of this and go directly to the handout, which is a 73-page handout. Let me know if that's useful or not. If it is useful, I will do it going forward, and I could add one on for the meeting. I just don't know if anyone's going to use it off the screen and how well it will work for people. I'm Richard Calhoun, real estate broker with Creekside Realty, working with buyers or sellers here in Silicon Valley. Appreciate likes and subscriptions. YouTube archive here, where you can type in the shorter green root URL, the Zoom meeting, the 73-page handout, which covers the important slides that we went over. And with that, seeing no mics unmuted, I'll say goodbye. Have a great week. See you next week. Bye for now.